Hey, welcome to Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS. In this two-part series, Jack Schonely and I sit down with Andre Schabron. Andre is an accomplished helicopter pilot holding an ATP certificate with experience across varied environments. With a professional demeanor and proactive approach, he excels in team settings and thrives under pressure. His aviation experiences encompass flying in both controlled airspaces and remote regions, including the Arctic. Andre is currently serving as a police helicopter pilot with the York Regional Police Department in Ontario, Canada. Andre contributes to the air support unit executing missions with precision and safety. His previous roles include supporting operations in the Arctic and remote oil and gas sites, demonstrating adaptability and resilience in challenging environments. Before his aviation career, Andre served as a police officer and detective with the Zurich Cantonal Police in Switzerland, honing his investigative and leadership skills over nearly 2 decades. Additionally, his experience in the Swiss Armed Forces further enriched his teamwork and communication skills. Thank you to our sponsors, Anodyne Electronics Manufacturing, Summit Aviation, and Shotover.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS. The Hangar Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, John Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Schonely.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like they're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
Hey, welcome to Hangar Z Podcast. I'm your host, John Gray. With us today for this really interesting conversation. This is probably one of the most unique conversations that we've had on the podcast is Sir Jack Schonely. How you doing, Commander?
Hey there, John. Glad to be here for this conversation. This will be great.
Yeah, we have a lot of natural curiosity regarding a lot of what we're going to talk about. So just to kind of hop right into it and start getting into this conversation, I'd like to welcome Andre Schabron to the podcast. How you doing, sir?
Very well, very well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for being willing to join us. Was I close at least on the name?
It was very close. No, it is good. It is good. It is good. It is good. You nailed that already.
All right. Okay. Well, we're off to a good start. So that's going in our favor. Just to kind of prelude to what we're going to talk about a little bit. You were born and raised in Switzerland.
Yes, that's correct.
Joined the military, then became a police officer in Switzerland, and then left Switzerland. Left and went to Canada, became a helicopter pilot, and you're now a law enforcement helicopter pilot in Canada.
Yeah, that's in a nutshell, that's it.
Yeah, super interesting. So we'll circle back to that and kind of dig into all those details because there's a ton to unpack there. But before we start, it's Hangar Z tradition to do drink of the day. And for me, I've got 2 drinks of the day today. It's still fairly early. I've been on a coffee kick, and coffee is the name of the game today. It's another Black Rifle coffee in my Hangar Z Yeti mug. And then I've also got some electrolyte water in honor of Jeff Ratkovich, our water expert. We're on the heels of St. Patrick's Day, which we celebrated here on Saturday night, but it was actually Sunday. And had quite a few drinks that night. And you know how that plays with your system the next day. So I'm rehydrating still from that celebration. That's my drink of the day. Andre, how about you?
So I went with water as well, just your favorite TV static, sparkling water. Yeah, I every time remember that now when I open the fridge and take out a can. And just an espresso, a little coffee I just made before. So
all right.
As if I'm not nervous already, I also have espresso here, so it's pretty okay.
So for espresso, do you have a cappuccino machine at home that you use to make that, or how do you brew your espresso?
No, unfortunately not. I would like to have a big, huge setup and everything. That would be great. We have a really small apartment here in almost downtown Toronto, our 1-bedroom apartment, and everything is according to that room that's available. So it's just an espresso machine, with the George Clooney capsules. That's it. At least I feel like George Clooney every time I make a coffee, so that's fun.
Yeah. We have an espresso machine. We love that. We actually, the first time we had an espresso was in Hawaii, of all places, and it was a post-dinner espresso, and it was fabulous. This is probably almost 10 years ago now. And my wife's like, write down the name of that machine. And we came home and we ordered one right away. It's good stuff.
Yeah. I like it. It's very easy, but I also would like to celebrate it more, to really kind of weigh all your coffee grounds and steer it and press it. So I would like to celebrate that coffee I make, but at the moment, I will go with that espresso. That's it.
Yeah. It's good to have some goals, right? That's it.
Yeah, exactly. At least.
Drink of the day goals. I like it. Jack, what do you got going today?
Well, I'm still waiting for that sponsorship call. Liquid Death.
All right.
The severed lime Liquid Death.
Yeah, for some reason our phones haven't been ringing, but we got to figure out how to make
what's
that
up
happen.
With that? I'm going to call them soon. Say, hey, what's going on here? How many times am I going to hold this can up to our huge audience out there in law enforcement aviation land?
Andre, for St. Patrick's Day, did you get a chance to celebrate, or were you working?
I didn't celebrate, but I also wasn't working. I just enjoyed a day with my wife, and I'm lucky. I'm off every weekend, so
good for you.
Yeah, no crime here on Sunday, so
yeah, criminals take the day off, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So,
MHM Publishing, the parent company that owns the Hangar Z podcast, they're out of Kitchener. So right near where you are, I actually flew into Toronto. That's Toronto, true. Right? You can't say Toronto.
Toronto. Yeah. I even picked that up just from hearing it, on the terminal frequency and all ATC. They all say Toronto, so I kind of picked that up. I didn't even really know it, but it's true. It's Toronto. Yeah.
Yeah. But flew into your city and left from there. Beautiful, beautiful country. You get out of the city and the farmland out there is just gorgeous. So next time I come through, we'll have to meet up in person for a beer or an espresso somewhere.
Could be a little bit tight. We're not going to be here that long anymore. So.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, a lot happened since we got in touch when we kind of figured out I could be on this podcast. Yeah, so we're actually going to move to the US.
Oh, very cool.
Oh, we add another chapter here to our questions.
Exactly.
That's good.
Well, let's jump in front of that since we're here. Without people knowing a whole lot about your background, let's just get into the move that you're going to make to the U.S. and then we'll go backwards from there.
It's my wife is Swiss and U.S. dual citizen. And through that, I was eligible to apply for a green card. That was quite a process, a long process.
Yeah.
And it finally came to an end just half a month ago with an interview at the consulate in Montreal, and everything went well. And I'm gonna get this immigration visa with which I can immigrate and then get the green card as soon as I immigrated to the States. So, and that visa is only valid for about 6 months. So whenever you get it, you really have to come. So otherwise you start from scratch again. So don't want to do that. And that's why we're going to move in the next 5 months, actually, somewhere.
Okay. So are you going to continue to fly here in the U.S.?
Oh, yeah. Don't know what yet. I'm not sure what yet, but I don't have a job lined up yet or anything, because that's just now they kind of gave me that visa. So now it's time to move. So now I have to figure out where I find a helicopter to fly.
All right.
This is kind of a job interview now.
Sure.
There's a lot of law enforcement agencies that listen to this and go, hey, we might just
it's actually
meet Andre. Where is he? Where?
Sure.
I'm excited to hear about your transition as you go to the U.S. and move to the next phase of flight and what that looks like for you. So let's start working backwards now. We did drink of the day and skipped over the hot seat, and we definitely cannot skip over the hot seat.
Oh,
we gotta put you in that seat for a little bit.
For sure, procedure is procedure. Let's do it.
Today's a Monday, and Mondays and Fridays are often difficult days at work because you're either on the heels of a holiday like St. Patrick's Day on a Monday, or it's Friday and you're like, man, we're leaving tomorrow to go to said thing. So meetings and things that take place on Mondays and Fridays are difficult. So if you had your choice to schedule an important meeting on a Monday or a Friday, what would you choose? Andre, we'll start with you on this one.
So like this today, I scheduled it for a Monday because I'm off every Monday. So
Okay.
I love my Mondays. And otherwise, it's okay, Friday or Monday. Probably would do it Monday just to kind of get a right kick in the butt into the week and then go from there.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like sometimes the beginning of the week can be rough because you've got a whole stack of things you got to get accomplished. So I always want to put off some of these things, these meetings until the middle of the week, and then I can kind of reassess midweek and go from there. But I like what you're saying too. I can see, kind of knowing exactly what's going to be in front of you for the whole week and just kind of kicking it in the butt, like you said, and going from there. Jack, what would your preference be there?
Monday, definitely Monday. Yeah, by Friday, you're wearing down and you're thinking ahead too much.
Yep.
And maybe your head's not in it, and then it's not worth having the meeting at all. So Monday for me.
Okay. All right. Like that. The next one's still kind of on the idea of the work life and scheduling and whatnot. And this typically for law enforcement aviation and folks in public safety in general is not even an option. But given the opportunity, Andre, to have a rigid work schedule or a flexible schedule where your hours, you just kind of work as you please, as long as you accomplish your hours, what would you prefer to have?
Yeah, the second. So I'm not the one for rigid work schedules at all. I mean, I've never actually worked like this. And that was with the reason why I went into law enforcement, because that 9 to 5 kind of lifestyle is not quite right for me. So I like to have my freedom, and or not only the freedom, you have to do the stuff you have to do, but if I can kind of decide when I do it, or it just comes and then it has to be done, that's right for me. So
yeah, I think that was one of the things I enjoyed too about the law enforcement schedule is every 6 months we did our shift change, and you could pick a whole new set of days that you work and a whole different set of hours that you work. So it kind of keeps it fresh, a little bit of variety in life. I didn't like working weekends a whole lot, but I did like working weekends in the sense that one, there was no traffic. And then two, I liked having weekdays off because there's not as many people out doing things. So there is always a kind of a balance between the two.
That's true, yeah.
Jack, what's your kind of thoughts on that?
Well, being retired, everything's flexible now. So, I should have thought of this on your first question and said Monday, Friday. What the heck's that? Every day, Saturday. But I liked being able to move as well to different times. Although I stayed on watches for a long time with my department, you would go to a watch, and you could stay there for years if you didn't get bumped off. It was by seniority. So the longer you were on that watch, the more chance you had of somebody else wanting to come there, and then you'd get bumped. But what we found, especially at air support, was that everybody kind of had their niche. Some people like graveyard, some people like day watch, some people like PM shift. And there wasn't a whole lot of movement, but you could. And it was nice to know that you could, if you felt like it. If all of a sudden you have something come up for the kids, or you're dealing with soccer practices or hockey practices and all that stuff, then maybe a certain watch, you'd look ahead and go, well, for the fall, I want to be on this watch. It was nice to have that flexibility.
Yeah. We had a small unit. There's only, at the time, there was only 3 shifts. You had a weekday day shift, a weeknight shift, and a weekend night shift. There was no weekend day shift back then. And I will say, I think it was last weekend or the weekend prior, we finally got our first day shift weekend flight crew approved. So now they're operating, every day all year. So that's cool. That was a big deal. So cool for our admin to see the value in adding that and making it happen. But yeah, it was difficult because essentially there were 3 shifts and there's 4 pilots. So it's really hard for a lot of the junior pilot would be on that shift, the junior shift forever, so we would rotate. Do you guys, Andre, or at the agency you're currently flying with, do you guys rotate, or how does that work?
thanks to our sponsor, Anodyne Electronics Manufacturing, a leading manufacturer of trusted special mission avionics for law enforcement, aerial firefighting, and utility operators. Visit www.aem-corp.com and learn how AEM's digital communication and loudspeaker systems, avionics consoles, radios, and specialty audio products can support your most demanding missions.
No, so we are a fairly small air support unit with just one machine. We have two, jokingly always say 2.5 pilot. My base manager, my boss is the fill-in pilot, so I refer to him as the 0.5. So it's one flies the day shift, the other fixed pilot flies the night shift, and he is just filling in when one of us needs a day off or whatever's going on, and we work 2 weeks of day shift and then 2 weeks of night shift, and then back and forth.
That's cool. Does your body agree with that, or is that challenging?
Yeah, the night shift is kind of challenging sometimes. I have a little bit difficult to get into it, so then I struggle the most. And then after the 2 weeks, I'm good, and then at the end of the 2 weeks, I'm kind of glad then to kind of change out again, phase out, and go back to day when actually other people are awake as well, not just me. But I like working at night. I always enjoyed night shift since I work in this kind of field, and I love flying at night. So from this perspective, I like the night shift a lot.
Yeah, that's when the action's there. I mean,
that's true. Yeah, it's not boring at all. So
no, it's not boring, and the flying's nice. Flying at night is great, and you're going to keep busy. So that's a big plus. That's a big plus.
That's true. Yeah,
I agree with you. My body didn't like working nights, but I liked the activity at nighttime, and I liked flying at night. It tended to be, the air was much smoother at night than during the day when, where we were, we had the wind that would kind of kick up every afternoon and just be turbulent. It wasn't gnarly wind or anything, but flying at night was much more peaceful. Yeah. What was challenging was the 1:30 flight in the morning when there's no radio traffic, there's nobody out, and you're, putting toothpicks in your eyeballs to keep them open,
Exactly,
so that was, that was the challenge for sure. But I did find, Jack, this kind of goes along the lines of what you're saying, is night shift was definitely busier, but day shift had the most peculiar crimes that took place. You know, like the one that comes to mind wasn't even my agency or even my generation, but you think back to San Diego PD and the tank pursuit.
Yeah.
Like,
great example.
That's the kind of stuff that happens during the day. It doesn't typically happen at night.
All the crazies.
Did you just say tank pursuit?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You have to look that up, Andre. Punch in,
I will.
When we're done here, you go to YouTube and you just punch in San Diego tank pursuit. It'll come up in 25 different forms, but watch the longest version so you can see the whole thing. It's incredible. Todd Jaeger from San Diego PD, we were just talking about him the other day, who we're trying to get as a guest. Todd he filmed that. So that's not a media video that you're going to watch. Okay. It is a video from a San Diego police helicopter. And Todd did a great job. And I won't spoil it for you and tell you the ending. But it's incredible. I mean, this tank goes through RVs that are parked on the street and cuts them in half. It cuts them in half. I mean, literally cuts them in half. It's quite unique. But I agree, John, a lot of the wildest, weirdest stuff was day watch stuff.
Yeah.
It wasn't the volume. You didn't have the volume, but you had the quality sometimes.
Yeah. It was,
no doubt about it.
It was wild. I miss all that, but like you said, I'm happy to have the flexibility in the schedule now that I do to get to do this and talk to people like Andre. But going back to that real quick, and then we'll move on. One of the reasons I think it's great to talk about things like the tank pursuit is because it kind of forces you to think through what I do and what resources do I have available for each person in each jurisdiction. Because man, there's a million things that could happen, in today's world. And how do you deal with it? And until you're like confronted with the situation, like, man, what do I do in this situation? You probably don't have the bandwidth to even consider all the options, so.
They were thinking on the fly. And Andre, just so you know, in the United States, they called Camp Pendleton, one of the biggest Marine bases is right there. They called them and said, "Hey, can you help us?" And they basically said, "Good luck." I mean, no, they're not going to help
That's what I
you.
thought. How in the world would I think, I have this task? I said, how in the world would I stop that thing? Because that's not made to stop. That's exactly made to do what it's doing right now. So
yeah. There's military people with weaponry that couldn't stop that. And now you're a cop in a helicopter.
Exactly.
No, over this, watching it. And again, I won't ruin the ending for you as to how this finishes, but it's amazing. A lot of heroism, a lot of courageous work, and a lot of outside the box thinking. And Todd did a fabulous job on that. He did. And, I'll crack him. He'll come on here eventually.
Yeah, I'd love to hear his insight and how he thought through that.
I've talked to him so many times about it, and I would introduce him at events and say, the people would come up and say, "Hey, Jack, how you doing? Hey, I'd like to meet my friend Todd Jager here from San Diego PD. He's the tank guy," and he'd get so mad. He goes, "Stop doing that!" And I go, "Hey, dude, you're the tank guy. Okay, whether you like it or not, it's part of your history." And you did a fabulous job. You should be proud of it. He goes, "Oh, I'm proud of it, but you don't have to tell everybody, So Todd, you're coming on. I'm going to schedule a day and just call him.
just like Harold, you're not getting away.
That's right.
Well, Andre, it's a pleasure to have you here. We're going to leave you with 2 hot seat questions instead of 3, give you a little break.
That's nice.
But that was fun. I love kind of digging through some of that stuff and seeing where it goes. I didn't think we'd talk about working hours and then talk about a tank pursuit in the same
that's true.
conversation. So it's you just never know where you're going to end up.
You never ever know where this is going to lead. Outline? What outline?
That just looks good on my desk.
Tank pursuits and watch preference.
Yeah. Well, you kind of alluded already where you grew up, but for our audience, can you talk about where you grew up, where you went to school, and what that looks like?
So yeah, I grew up in Switzerland, close to Zurich. My people know that. It's a pretty city in Switzerland. It's maybe 20 minutes by car outside, kind of countryside. So bear in mind, Switzerland is a very small country. Very small. You can barely find it if you zoom out on the map. So you see whole Europe with all the countries. You can barely find Switzerland in the middle there. So it's very small. So everything is close together. Especially now I live here in Canada. I see the distances are different. So everything is very close together. I went to school there, so 9th grade. And then it would be then, if I'm not mistaken now, the parallels in the school system. High school and higher up. And so I didn't do that. I went through one of the thousands of apprenticeship programs we have where you can graduate after. So was a draftsman for in design engineering. You're drawing technical. We designed trains and stuff in this company. I did that. And it was relatively soon clear to me that 9 to 5, there we have it again. That's kind of not my world. I more saw it towards, we call it blue light organizations. So police, firefighting, or EMS. All the emergency lights on the vehicles are blue in Switzerland. So it's blue light organizations. It was clear for me, there we go. That's the way I will go. First, I actually aimed towards EMS. Then that was difficult to get in. If you don't have some kind profession or whatever, some knowledge before in healthcare system or working with patients, whatever. So me with my technical background, that was not really a thing there that counted a lot. So I also thought, okay, police would be pretty cool too. So especially I was hanging on every time a blue light drove by the window in my office, I kind of hung on that window and thought, oh, that'd be pretty cool. So to a point where people almost got annoyed about that, but it doesn't really matter now. It also didn't matter then. So, so that was actually then clear for me, okay, I'm going to try that to get into the police academy and do that. But Switzerland has a mandatory military time you have to do. That's why I joined the Swiss Armed Forces because I had to. That was not too bad for me. I actually enjoyed it. Did even a little bit more than I had to do. Was kind of towards to be an enlisted officer, or at least going to officer school. But then I got into police academy, and I said, okay, military,
This is it.
see you.
Yeah.
That is it. I go and pursue my dream as a police officer.
Yeah.
What I did, yeah.
It's interesting when you look at countries that make that a requirement. I think it's a great thing. I think to force people to look at something bigger than themselves and to serve their fellow country is a good thing. What's your take on that, having gone through it? Would you say it was a good experience and good beneficial program for the country, or not?
Yes, I would say so, at least then. So it was good for me. It is good for the country. That there's a lot of discussion about that. Is it necessary? Do we need that? Switzerland is neutral. We are not participating in in any crisis or so. We do some peacekeeping missions, NATO partners and stuff. But otherwise, which is kind of there to defend our country. So a lot of people don't see the necessity of that and say, who's going to come here? And why? What's it spend so much money, obviously, and force people to do that? Maybe changed a little bit in the last couple years with Russia and Ukraine. That's very close. That's, for me, I just kind of mapped it out once. So that's Kiev to Zurich, the distance from the two cities. That's like here, Toronto to Winnipeg. That's very close. So if you would think, okay, that's where the Russians do what they're doing now, that's very close, too close for comfort. So maybe that changed a little bit. I'm now away from Switzerland for 5 years. So, but for me, it was a good time.
Back up a minute, Andre. What was the minimum time that you had to serve?
You had to do the basically your ground course, about 15 or 18 weeks. And then it's the militia system, like reserve. So then you go home and then you do a 2 or 3 week course every year till you're 34. So I'm not entirely sure with all these numbers anymore, if that's still correct or if it even was correct then. Nowadays, you can also do it all in once, basically go there, do it in 1 or 2 years, whatever. Depends a little bit on the ranking and stuff. You can do it in once, then you are through and you can forget it for the rest of your life. So, yeah.
And then are there also people that join the military and they are full-time military for 20 years or 25 years?
Yes, you can do that too. You can do that professionally. There's a smaller part, there's a lot. The Air Force and has that. But even there, you have militia, where it's just they go back to their day jobs and they come every year for 2 or 3 weeks, fly their Hornets, and they're Super Pumas, and otherwise they are airline pilots and the kind of stuff like this. So I just bring that's an example because I know someone who does that, and it's kind of unique. Yeah.
Historically, being that you've been a neutral country for so long, did you find that the armed forces were more of a civil response type thing? If there was a natural disaster, you would be activated to go and help with whatever the natural disaster was. Is that more how it's being utilized?
Thanks to our sponsor, Summit Aviation, a full-service provider for business, government, parapublic, and military aviation, specializing in maintenance, modifications, avionics, interiors, and paint. Discover more at summit-aviation.com.
Yes, that is exactly. That's where you see it the most. Actually doing something. It sounds a little bit mean now, but it's actually doing something useful, or where everybody sees, oh, okay, that's they come and they help and they bring their big excavators when half a mountain slides down because of heavy rain and stuff. So it's utilized for that.
Okay,
so
very
that's
cool.
A good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think it's an interesting conversation. I'm interested, Jack, to hear your opinion on what your thought is on that.
About everybody going in?
Yeah.
I think it's so good for certain countries. I think Switzerland, Israel, smaller countries. I think it works really well. I don't know that would work very well in the United States.
Yeah.
And without being cruel, I mean, just go to your local coffee shop and order something and have somebody wait on you and imagine them being in the military for a year. No, I don't want them anywhere near my son who was wanted to go to the military. I don't want them anywhere near him. But in a smaller country, I think you can limit. There's a more of a limit to that. You know what I mean? And they're not in for long periods of time where they can justify it, and it's probably good for everybody in many ways. But in the U.S., I just think that would. I mean, you go back to Vietnam, which is in our lifetimes. I mean, and that was not an all-volunteer army and military. And you look at the problems that they had, the issues that came up that aren't there anymore. There are other issues, but the issues during Vietnam, they'll never be repeated in a volunteer army because they won't tolerate that nonsense, now. So I have mixed feelings about it. I understand why countries do it. There'll certainly be a benefit to, I'm sure, Andre, you could tell us that, the discipline and the, getting exposed to that and that a rigid schedule and being responsible. There's some really positive things that will go into other career choices, no matter what you do. Yeah. So that's the plus.
Yeah, I think it was good for me. Good, I liked it. So I see that's a little bit different. The problem is if it's mandatory, you're not gonna get the people they want to do it. So might the quality of that, what you get of the effort from these people, might questionable sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge. Then you make it mandatory, you force people. So how good is it gonna be what they deliver? Because they really don't want to do it. So but it's probably not one solution that just works. It's just difficult in general also.
We're seeing it right now with recruiting in the United States is way down, just like for law enforcement. But in the military, they're way, way down. Why? Because the military doesn't look real appealing right now for a lot of reasons that we will not get into. But everybody knows what the reasons are. I mean, it's gotten away from the mission. When you start getting away from the mission and start worrying about all this other nonsense, there's people that go, well, I wanted to go in the military, but I'm not going to tolerate that. That's nonsense. I want to go learn how to fly, or I want to go learn how to operate a tank and whatever. So it's difficult. Law enforcement deals with it too. We talk about that regularly. The image thing is, you got to worry about that.
Yeah. It seems like any profession that deals with something bigger than just you as a person is struggling right now. And I think people are so inwardly focused. They're losing sight of what it means to be a part of a community and what it means to help folks out that need it. So yeah, it's an interesting conversation, and it's interesting that you got to be a part of that, and then go to continue that really as a police officer in your country. Can you talk about, well, before we actually do that, can you talk about when you were in the armed forces, what you did there and kind of how that led to your transition to law enforcement?
So that actually didn't have much to do with law enforcement. So it's more an infantry kind of job. It's not available anymore like it was then. Now, so we have in Switzerland had a lot of bunkers in the mountains and pretty much everywhere. Half the country is bunkers. And so a whole department was kind of dedicated to this infrastructure to keep it up and running and stuff. And we are kind of, it's hard to explain kind of the infantry part of this department. So we were not constantly in these bunkers, but we went out and took care of strategic objects that you could blow up in case of an invasion of the country, because we have a lot of tunnels and bridges, because it's very hilly, half Switzerland is mountains. We have a lot of strategic ways in or out and you could block and dismantle this stuff with explosives. So we were doing that, training that.
Wow, that's interesting.
A lot of newer objects had already explosive built in. That changed, I think, about 2000. I just Googled it recently. 2007 or until 2010, the last object was dearmed and all the explosives were taken out, because nowadays that you can handle that stuff differently. But then 20 years ago or 25 years ago, actually, we brought all our mock-up explosives to these kind of bridges over these deep valleys and kind of fake loaded them, and
That's interesting. I think of as a kid, we used to go to the river a lot, the Colorado River, and there's bridges that have rope swings and stuff that you jump off of, and I think of as a kid, doing what you're saying, you go to some bridge and you're like, look at this rope swing. That's not a rope, son. Don't be hanging from that.
It's a fuse.
But Switzerland it's a bucket list place for me. From the pictures that I've seen, it's the most beautiful place on earth. It is such a beautiful place. I just, it really cool that you got to grow up there and be a police officer there. I'm really interested to hear, what criminality is like in Switzerland, because from an outsider's perspective, I see pictures, there's no trash anywhere. You'd think like nothing wrong ever happens there. So can you talk about becoming a police officer and what your experience was like there?
Yeah, for sure. Now, especially I have the two sides from North America and back home. A lot is the same. A lot is the same. It's very, very similar. So I felt at home here in the police work very quickly. What a really big difference is the violence towards the police. I see that. I now think especially of the US, where everybody seems to shoot at a cop. That's just kind of normal. That does rarely happen in Switzerland. It might increase slowly, but we are far away from what it is in especially in the States. Gun violence is a little bit on the lower side. It's increasing. It was increasing the 20 years I was there, and it's still increasing now since I'm not there anymore. But in comparison to North America, for sure, it's that's a big difference. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same. They're all the same ridiculous kind of calls, for, my neighbor, and the fence has the wrong color, and there's the cat is not there. All this kind of, oh yeah, that's exactly what I want to deal with. That's why I joined law enforcement. Thank you very much. Kind of cases, they are all the same. Yeah.
Yeah, the neighborhood dispute calls were always the worst calls to ever deal with, because you can't win in those scenarios. You go in, and these neighbors have been having this dispute for years. It's built up to where it gets to the point where they have to call law enforcement because they're fighting about it now. And you're supposed to figure out a solution to this years-long problem in a matter of a couple minutes. It's a difficult place to be in. I hated those too. Absolutely hated those. Go back to leaving the military and going to law enforcement. What was your academy like once you started? And then what was your first assignment outside of the academy?
So academy is a 1 year full-time program, full pay and full-time. So with just everything you can imagine. A lot of law stuff. Obviously then the whole shooting range and tactical driving and tactical whatever comes up. So after 1 year, you graduate, ideally, from this academy. And then it changed a lot the last 25 years. So for me, we have kind of five different main departments. That's the one is security, police, where you go in first after the academy. You join little task force, and you kind of go wherever they need a bunch of guys at one point, because they kind of, I don't know, they have a suspect somewhere in a bar or something. So, okay, we cannot just do two cruisers here, and we need more guys. Let's call that little task force. Nothing to do with SWAT or special tactics or so. It's just kind of more manpower. So to get into that, after I did that for 2 years, this was kind of the mandatory official way to go. You go there, you get used to all this law enforcement life and job. And then from there, there are different, it's almost open wherever you want to go. We have a very big department is traffic and kind of highway patrol kind of thing. So we divide there in our the police. The cantonal police of Zurich is a state police. So it's a canton. What's here province? You have states. Is there a canton? So it's the cantonal police. So it's a kind of state police. We divide there whatever's happening on the road. That's the traffic / highway patrol kind of responsibility. We have 5 bases all over the canton, and I did that for the next about 6 years, with mainly focus on all the big accidents on highways and stuff, and do truck controls if they all obey with their laws and they're not too high and too heavy, and whatever technical specifications and stuff. I did that for about 6 years. And after that, I joined it's called the regional police. That's then the ones to do all the other stuff that's not on the road. They're just police stations, like a little bit like a sheriff's office, doing all that kind of stuff. Then working with from homicide, so that goes to the specialists then, but still you are the first who goes there, and all the little stuff, shoplifter, little dealer behind the playground at schoolyard, and what's everything else. So I had to do that, I had to do that. I have to admit that I didn't really want to do that. Didn't really fit to me. I had to do that because I wanted to join surveillance, and there was a mandatory time you had to go through the other stuff first before you could join surveillance, but I then actually ended up at the end. That's the time I enjoyed the most.
That's cool. Going back to your early days, or I guess out of the academy, when you come out of the academy, do you hit your assignment armed, or are you in an unarmed capacity?
No, armed. There is no unarmed police.
Okay.
So yeah.
And then the second question was, when it comes to traffic enforcement, we had our friend Harold Brink on the podcast recently, and he's talking about some of the performance cars that traffic used to catch speeders. What did you guys use for your traffic enforcement vehicles?
Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, sole 6-axis EO/IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24 megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking.
We started out there in the early days with Volvos from Sweden. And then we changed pretty soon, and since then it's BMW.
Okay, very nice.
530 turbo diesel, pretty fun cars to drive. So they are not enhanced performance or anything. It's how it comes from BMW, but they go well. So
Harold wasn't he wanting to drive the Porsche? And then he got there and didn't have the Porsche anymore.
Harold's from the Netherlands, and they had Porsches that in
That's
that traffic
sick.
unit for a while, and then they switched to Volvos as well. And he was so disappointed because he's a Need for Speed guy. He rides Ducatis, and he likes to go fast. Old Harold.
I think our police had a Porsche too, but that was 1965 or so. We have it in a museum, where you had one call a day or maybe a weekend. That was it, kind of.
Oh my gosh! But you still went there on a Porsche.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So then you kind of, but not anymore, unfortunately.
One thing that jumps out, and it jumped out again, and you were thinking it too, John, when Andre said the police academy's 1 year. That is twice as long as most United States police academies. And people don't like hearing it, but I say it all the time and say it in the United States, it should be a year as well. And I know people don't like that, but that's tough because those are the people that don't know what they're getting into. There are police academies that are shorter than 6 months. I know that well. I work at one part-time. 4 months. You cannot learn everything you need. And this is the example I give. And this shouldn't surprise anyone, but in most states, the number of hours that you get in 6 months at a police academy, those number of hours to graduate and become a full-time armed police officer, making life or death decisions, those hours are less than it takes to get certified as a hairdresser in the United States. That's absurd. That's absurd. And when you look at it that way and go, well, somebody who is, working on someone's hair needs more hours than a police officer, something's wrong with the system. So in Europe and across Europe, it's pretty common that it's a year. I mean, Switzerland's not unique in that way, I don't believe.
No, it's not.
It's the way it should be. It is. And again, people don't like hearing it. Politicians hate hearing it because that costs money.
Right.
And you're not getting any bang for your buck, but you get it later.
Mm-hmm.
That year is a year well spent. You come out of there very knowledgeable, very skilled, and ready to go. I'm sure that the year seemed long to you, Andre. I'm sure it did.
For sure it does. And at 21 years old, I thought, you're nuts.
Exactly. But
now
looking back,
what do
you think?
It should be like this. You have to train these officers and you have to educate them. Police work is not as easy as it looks. It's not just run out there, and you have to think a lot. It's just too much involved, especially nowadays where it gets more complicated and complicated. How you handle these cases, how you handle evidence, these people had to be educated and trained properly, and then you get also quality work afterwards. And
I rest my case, Your Honor. Exhibit 1, Andre. I mean, and by the way, that's not an uncommon response that Andre just gave. When you talk to people that have gone to academies for a year and you say, oh yeah, it was a long time. But in hindsight, that was really good for me. I was very prepared. And you talk to people that go to 6-month academies, John, you and I can relate to that. Were we truly prepared after 6 months? And the answer is no. No, it took a long time to be anywhere close to prepared for what we were dealing with. Thank goodness that we had training officers that went the extra mile. We learned on the job, the hard way, making mistakes, screwing things up, getting in trouble, and some of those things can be alleviated by more academy time. But I just wanted to bring that up because every time I hear the year, I know there's people that are listening going, did he just say that he was in the academy for a year? Yes, he said that.
Yeah. It's not because I'm that stupid. It's because it's...
It's funny. I think back to my first day, phase 1 FTO training. I was at Mid-City in San Diego, and they issued you laptop computers that you're supposed to bring with you on shift. It's with you all the time. I was so flustered my first day. I left the house in a hurry, left the laptop, show up to the station parking lot. And in that moment, I pulled in the parking and I remember I had forgotten the laptop computer. Like, you can't do anything without a laptop, right? Our job is to write reports. So I call my wife in a panic. I'm like, babe, can you please bring the laptop to the police station? So I give her the address and she hauls butt down there. And, luckily we go to briefing, do our briefing. I tell my FTO, this is what I did. I'm an idiot. Of course I get scalded for it, which I should have been. And my wife shows up just after briefing's over, gives me the computer, and it's all good. But it goes back to what you're saying. I was so flustered. I had no business being on the street after 6 months because I just, was not prepared.
I felt the same way. With great people, but I felt the exact same way. What am I getting into here? Am I really ready for this? And 6 months seemed like a long time, but in hindsight, I'm saying that should have been double.
Yeah.
And it should be today. And the fact that it's not, because what happens if you go to an academy for 6 months or 4 months or whatever it is, shortened, and then you go out and get trouble, these people that are going to hammer you. I mean, your own department's going to hammer you. The media is going to hammer you. The district attorney is going to hammer you and say, Well, I have less time training than a hairdresser. Okay.
Yeah, how would I
what do you
know?
expect from me? What do you expect out of me? What's wrong with you? It's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Andre, you had mentioned, I think you said your last assignment was in surveillance, or that's where you wanted to get to. Can you talk about what that last assignment was like and what that unit did?
So yeah, exactly. Surveillance, just everything that was whatever our investigators were investigating in the different departments of economy stuff or financial stuff or counterterrorism, or just use that now because inside my surveillance unit, we had 4 teams, and I was in the one team that was specialized for counterterrorism and counterintelligence cases. We had some more training, especially not that much for the counterterrorism, but it falls under the same law in Switzerland. But we had enhanced training for the counterintelligence part, since these guys know exactly what we are doing. They are trained in surveillance. So we got some more training there, worked together with the Swiss intelligence service, and had some interesting things to do there. And yeah, I was just I'm still, surveillance is, I think it's a very cool trade, and I still like that. I would still go back if I can't fly anymore or so. I really like that, and that was great. 5 years I was there.
Did you use air assets to assist you in surveillance?
We did. We trained that. So we had a helicopter. Actually, it gets used in a quite different than it is here. So no, not for pursuits or daily ground support unit, ground unit support. I mean, so we had some training with them, but that was really just kind of training. So not in an actual case. We didn't do that. Yeah.
So you worked. I mean, you worked hard. That's not easy without an air asset overhead to follow people.
No, we actually really followed it. We actually really followed it. Yeah, without air assets. Yeah.
Well, Jack, you know that the surveillances that we worked, I would say almost half of them would not have been successful had it not been for aviation being overhead.
I think you're being kind.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is hard unless, well, let me back up. Oh, it's not hard, but you're going to get burned. They're going to see you. With an air asset, it's so much easier for the people on the ground. They can back way off, and having that eye on it from the air was so valuable. Our surveillance units that we worked with, they loved air support because they knew what you just said was that on a lot of occasions they would probably lose this person.
Yeah,
not all. They can do it. The better units, the highly trained units, like Andre, it sounds like that unit's so dedicated. You probably had a lot of success, but it takes a lot of hard work and techniques, and some units can do that. But most surveillance units don't have enough people, and you can't do it with 3 people.
Yeah.
I mean, you just can't.
Right.
You need 8 or 10 or 12,
It needs a lot. Yeah, it needs a lot of work on this kind of, yeah. And you have to go, I especially say now for this intelligence stuff where your counterparts know what we're doing. You have to work slowly. You could just a little bit further and a little bit further and then leave it alone, because if you're too close, too long, they're gonna figure it out. Yeah, they're gonna see it. So you have to be very careful, and sometimes, now I want to know it now. And no, we can't, because we can go home otherwise then. So it needs a lot of discipline and kind of keep you back, like a little bit the canine who wants to go there. You really have to kind of dial back a little bit. And so, that made it possible in the most cases. Yeah.
It's interesting. We talk about the things that make people good tactical flight officers. And the 2 things that I found that are good building blocks for good TFOs. One is a canine operator. Every person who I've interacted with that's been a TFO, that's been a canine officer prior to that, is awesome at the job. The 2 is somebody who's worked in a surveillance unit like you're describing, being able to understand what's happening on the ground and how to set up the takeaways and all the different things that need to be put in place before that surveillance before it starts and stops and restarts, and all the things that happen during surveillance. I feel like the folks that have that experience makes them so much more valuable What's your takeaway from that, Jack? Did you see the same thing?
Oh, I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%. Surveillance people, that are doing it every day, they understand things that the average patrol officer never, ever, ever thinks of, even if they're doing their job great. They just aren't thinking about that. They're thinking about 3 steps ahead, and they're thinking about, what's this guy going to do next? And, that benefits a TFO in such a big way. And then the canine side, I can speak to that. Part of it was knowing the city because you were everywhere. Part of it was coordinating tactical situations and taking charge of them, which canine did regularly. And now TFOs do it. Communication. But again, the tactics, knowing the tactics and thinking about what the bad guy is going to do. I mean, canine and surveillance people both think about that in their jobs in different ways, but they both think about, well, what's this guy doing? Where is he trying to get to? Where is he moving? Where is he driving to? And it helps them in their jobs. And then they get a TFO job and they can apply that. And I think that's where it comes in.
Yeah. Well, Andre, I want to jump ahead slightly here and we'll come back again. But for you, having been a police officer for 18 years in Switzerland, taking all that experience from surveillance to ground operations, and then now you're a law enforcement pilot in Canada, did that experience as a police officer on the ground, has it benefited you as a pilot in law enforcement? Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, sole 6-axis EO/IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24 megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking. Thanks to our sponsor, Summit Aviation, a full-service provider for business, government, parapublic, and military aviation, specializing in maintenance, modifications, avionics, interiors, and paint. Discover more at summit-aviation.com. Thanks to our sponsor, Anodyne Electronics Manufacturing, a leading manufacturer of trusted special mission avionics for law enforcement, aerial firefighting, and utility operators. Visit www.aem-corp.com and learn how AEM's digital communication and loudspeaker systems, avionics consoles, radios, and specialty audio products can support your most demanding missions.
Thank you to our sponsors for supporting the Hangar Z podcast, as well as the Vertical HeliCASTS platform. Without your support, we wouldn't be able to have these conversations. As we get into summer and you all start traveling, I hope you take us with you on vacation to listen as you navigate the world. We have some great conversations coming up, including a 2-part series on Phoenix PD, a 2-part series profiling the Michigan State Police, and we also released our first recording from the Hangar Z Vertical Valor Road Tour. During this road tour, Jack Schonely and I joined forces with Brent Bundy from Vertical Magazine to promote agencies across the southeastern portion of the United States, including Oxford PD in Alabama, Nashville Metro PD in Tennessee, the DC Metro Police, and the United States Park Police in Washington, D.C. Looking forward to visiting these great agencies to promote the good work they're doing day in and day out. Cheers.
Time to close up the hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS.